guys, Demon Driver here. I want to show you in this video how I take regular 3-ounce carbon fiber cloth and can turn it into a fully molded nose section of any kind of RC aircraft that you're making. This nose here is a Convair 990/880 nose section. The nose sections of those two aircraft were exactly the same, as were a lot of the parts on the 880 and 990 were the same part. But this is either going to be the nose to the Delta 880, that plane, or the Swissair 990 Coronado, of which there's one beautifully preserved in Geneva, Switzerland. Beautiful plane. So I made the mold for this years ago, and the American Coronado, American 990, that has a standard fiberglass nose section. But this nose section I just made out of carbon fiber, 3-ounce carbon fiber cloth. And in this video I'm going to show you how I lay the cloth into the mold and laminate it and get the resin in there and let it set, and then pull it apart and then tweak it. It needs a little bit of work on top of this, but this will someday soon be part of an 880 or 990. So yeah. Alright guys, sit back and relax, and let's get down to work. Let's make a nose section. Alright, so what are we going to need in order to make our Convair 990/Convair 880 nose section out of carbon fiber cloth as opposed to standard fiberglass? Well, of course, the first thing we're going to need is carbon fiber cloth. This is 3-ounce carbon fiber cloth that I guess get from CST Carbon Fiber. Hopefully I should have enough right here in order to make our nose section mold, right and left. And of course, obviously what we're going to need is the right and left Convair 990/Convair 880 nose section mold. These are old handmade molds I made several years ago. Made by hand out of a master molded nose, and then made these. And then obviously we're going to need some rubber gloves, latex gloves, some brushes. We're going to need some clamps. Here is obviously a Convair 880, just for reference. That's what we're going to be making right there. About that much of a nose, and a marker or some kind of pen that we can mark the carbon fiber cloth with, so we know where to cut when we're making our pieces. And then casting resin, and I had some of this Zap Z-Epoxy finishing resin sitting around. This stuff is great for this application. And yeah, so that's what we need, and obviously a couple of scissors and to help cut the carbon fiber cloth. Alright, let's get to it. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to lay in this carbon fiber cloth into one half of the of our Convair. These are going to be for I think the white Delta Convair 990, the Convair 880 I'm making. I think these will be the nose for it, but I'll make, and then I got the Swissair 990 coming, so I gotta make the nose for that as well. So what I want to do is I want to kind of just gently kind of press the I want to press the carbon fiber cloth down into, or the best that I can, into the half of the mold, and I kind of press that down into it like so. And then what I do, once I have that kind of where I want it, you'll see that the carbon fiber cloth will sort of start to form the kind of this inner shell of the. It'll kind of adhere to the mold itself. So I take a marker. And now what I want to do is I start to create a line to where to cut, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to do two halves, a right half and a left half. Just the right half, and then I'm getting my hair in my mouth here. Got a right half, left half. So what I do is I come in with a marker, As you can see, I come in with a marker and I mark off where I need to cut the mold, or excuse me, to cut the carbon fiber cloth, so that I have an insert for the right and the left, and then I lay them both in, and then I sandwich it all together, and then I have little strips of carbon fiber cloth that I then put inside once it's closed, so that it joins the right and half sides of the actual cloth, so that then you have one whole continuous piece. You pull the two halves apart and you have a full connected, fully connected and fully one-piece carbon fiber nose section for either a Convair 880 or Convair 990 or any RC plane you make. So what I do is I then come in with my scissor and I go ahead and I cut along the line that I just made. Now see, here's the thing about, you got to be careful about this carbon fiber cloth, is because it's woven together. There's strips and strands of carbon fiber interwoven in a cross weave stitch. Be careful, because they start to separate out and you can have an entire, you see what's happening here? If you're not careful, that can happen, and it just keeps pulling on itself and it will completely unravel itself. So you got to be real careful of that. Once the carbon fiber cloth starts to pull like that, it's just going to keep pulling. So I'm cutting along the paint line that I just made. See that? And there we are. Look at that. Right there. This is my right hand side insert piece for the Convair 880 or 990 nose section. And I'm just going to keep saying that because I don't know which one this is going to be for. Because the 990 and the 880 Coronado, the 990 Coronado and the 880 had the same exact nose section. Only difference is slightly different instruments in the 990 nose section, or cockpit flight deck, as opposed to the 880. 880 was a couple of years older, and the 990 was kind of the improved 880. So you had some improvements in flight instruments. And right here is the left-hand side, and I'm gonna do exactly the same thing with this hand side. I'm gonna copy what I just did with this side. And here we are. Here is our right-hand side, left-hand side, Convair 880 / Convair 990 nose section, and we have carbon fiber cloth inserted, right? Next step is we add and apply our casting resin, okay? That's the next step, and we need our brush and need to don our rubber gloves. And through all this, you do not need a mask or respirator, just as long as you're not using a gas-sensitive casting resin. Okay, as long as you're not doing that, you should be fine. Okay, now before we add the resin into the mold, I'm going to go ahead and very gently remove the carbon fiber cloth, the insert piece. I'm going to very gently put it onto like a trash bag or some plastic, so that nothing catches it and starts to pull apart the fiber, because once this fiber starts to pull apart, it's very hard to keep it together. So you got to be really careful. See, the little pieces start to fragment like that. So you got to be really mindful, and obviously try and keep the mold clean, and try and get rid of any kind of little jaggies or pieces or debris, dirt, any kind of, anything like that you want to get out of there, so that that doesn't become a problem as you start to lay in the pieces, and you start to lay in the, you start to brush in the resin. All right, so I'm mixing up right now our casting resin, which is the Z-Epoxy from Zap, excuse me. And I'm mixing it up here. The good stuff about this resin here, it has a 30-minute work time, which is about as quick as I would want to make it. I don't want to make it any quicker than a 30-minute setting time. If it's too short, if it's shorter than that, it's not giving you enough time to basically to do what you need to do. So we just start to very gently brush it into the mold, like that. We brush it in. There we are. Nothing to it. And we brush it in. We just get that stuff in there. Just don't hold back. Get it in there, because that way when you get it into this side, it's a lot easier to, you don't have to force the stuff through the carbon fiber cloth. It's not as hard to do, and then you don't get those ugly areas, what I call dry spots, where the carbon, you know, the epoxy didn't get through, and now it's just a mess. Unfortunately, my good neighbor is running a compressor, so that might cause a little bit of trouble here, but it shouldn't be that bad. So we take our insert that we just had, and we lay it back in like so. Look at that. Fits in there like a charm. Look at that. And we now use our hands to position it like so, and we can kind of press it into the mold. And you can see by what I'm doing in this video, this is really straightforward. This is not an incredibly difficult thing to do. It's not. Some people, when they hear the word mold, they tend to panic, and they think that that's something that's so far outside of what they know how to do. But that's not at all the case. Mold making is very straightforward, very easy. It's not that hard to do. Mold casting, mold making, the actual making of the mold. I mean, you can use a 3D printer if that's what you want to do. That's the easy way to do it. You just have the 3D printer make the mold, and then there you go. You know, these were made by hand. I hand made these from a Master 880-990 nose section. I made these several years ago, and these have held up really well. So then I come back in with my resin, and I do the inner side. Now, this is where you pick up the strength, because you have it on both sides. You have it on the inside, you have it on the outside. That's how you really do it, my friends. And the good thing is we got a good half hour to work on this stuff before it starts to kick, which in many ways is actually really not that long when you really think about it. In the grand scheme of things, that's not very long. Some people would say I want to have more time than that, but for this case, it's okay. So we're going to continue brushing this into here. Okay, very important. Now that you have the resin all brushed in, right? This is our left-hand side right here. Right-hand side, this is our left-hand side. Make sure there's no bubbles or pockets. Make sure it's completely flush. The carbon fiber cloth is completely flush against the wall of the mold. Crucially important, vitally important. And once you do this also, you want to trim away the excess very gently, because what will happen is the weight of this extra will start to have extra carbon fiber cloth will begin to kind of pull. It could potentially pull on the mold cloth, the carbon fiber cloth, as it's sitting and as it's setting. So you got to be real careful on that. Okay, what we did on this side, now we're going to do on this side. We're gonna do the same thing on the right-hand side. So I very gently take this insert out, and I go ahead and clean that out, and then apply my epoxy casting resin to that side. And now I very gently lay in the right-hand side piece of carbon fiber cloth. Very gently, and just take your fingers and just very, very gently press it into the mold. Very gently Run your hand through it, but be very careful because you don't want to catch any of the strands of cloth, because you'll get a tear, you'll get a run, and then you're in big trouble. And then we brush in the inner epoxy resin like we did on the other side, on the left. All right, the next thing, now that right and left side has had the carbon fiber cloth inserted and epoxy resin, casting resin is on, and they are completely coated and covered. The next thing that will happen is I will join the two pieces together, right and left, clamp them together, and then add in these joining pieces. These are the top and bottom joining pieces that will go inside the mold that will attach right and left spheres of the nose section together. These strips will make them one. Let me show you through actual execution of my method. So, I very gently take the two halves, very gently. No haste, my friends, no need for it. So I very gently line the two pieces up. Very gently. Oh God, I haven't done this in so long, I've become a bit rusty at this mold making racket. All right, now, this is important. This is where these clamps come into play, because these clamps are what hold the mold together. So you got to be really, you got to get them all lined up properly. You got to get everything lined up, because if you don't, you're going to have a really, screwed up mold. You're going to have what they call in South Philadelphia a screwed up mold. You know what I'm saying? You're going to have a really goofed up mold. You know what I'm talking about? You don't want that. You don't want a cockamamie crooked mold. There's people, you know, they're going to be looking at you funny. You're walking down the street with your Convey 880 nose section, it's really, hey pal, what'd you do? What happened? That's all crooked. So you don't want that. So we get our clamps and we start to clamp the nose section together. Very important. These clamps are incredibly important in mold making when you have two spheres. You have a right, you have a top and a bottom, a right and a left. It's very important to get these things on properly, because if you don't, you have what's better known as mold separation, and that's a kiss of death. So, all right, so I've got the right and left side here. Let me very gently pick it up and explain it to you so you see it better. So, there's the top of the mold. Let me get that piece out of there. So we're looking down the mold right now. There's the top of the 880, 990 nose section and the bottom. Now, do you see the problem? What do we got going on there? What we have, and I'm holding this by hand. I'll try and hold this in a way so you can see it on camera. I'm going to put these strips, the strips that I showed you just recently, I'm going to lay these into position inside there. I'm going to lay them into position. Okay? They're going to go all in there, and they're going to join the right and left hemispheres together, the right and left halves together. So we are going to do that now. So I'm going to take a piece of joining carbon fiber here, carbon fiber cloth. I'm going to get some resin on it, right, so it wants to stick. And then what I do, my friends, is I very carefully adhere it to the inside of the mold. I hope you can see this. Here we go. Ah, yes. There we are. Very carefully, we place it inside our mold. There we are, joining the top of the right and left spheres together. All right, I'm sorry. I'm going to stop talking like Basil Rathbone over here. Whoop, whoop, whoop. See, that's where you can make mistakes, man. You gotta be careful. Got it. This is like making a souffle over here. You can really mess things up if you're not careful and you're not careful with your hands. You gotta be really. You have to be very, very careful what you're doing because you can mess things up big time. This is a very crucial stage here. And like anything in scratch building, if you're not careful, you can very quickly take something that makes sense and take something that's working well and have it turn into a complete catastrophe. There we are, look at that. And you just place that in with your hand and you just kind of pat it in, but you gotta really look and make sure that you're not getting any daylight, you're not getting, you're joining the halves and you actually have cloth there. Because there's nothing worse than when you pull these two halves apart and then you got a big gaping hole of an area that you missed. That's a real kick in the gonads. That's real painful. That's humiliating when that happens. And it's happened to me, trust me. I've been down that road. Alright, so I'm just putting strips in, that's all I'm doing. I'm just placing strip placement. It sounds slightly dirty. Well, stripping placement. So I'm trying to keep this in frame here for you guys. Okay, there we are. There we are. One of our pieces of carbon fiber cloth had a little bit of tape on it, but that's okay. That's not a big deal. But we can use our hand to basically push the carbon fiber into the places it needs to be, and that's another benefit. So what I'm doing is, again, for those of you late to the class, I'm just putting strips in here, joining these two pieces together. Okay, so basically I have all of the carbon fiber cloth inside of our Convair 990-880 mold. I take one good last eye inspection of everything, make sure everything looks good, and it does. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, I'm going to set it down just like this so that all of the resin goes down towards the nose so it sets and hardens evenly. And then once it's hardened after a day, I mean, it's 30 minutes, but you know what? I'm going to set this down for a little while. The longer you let it set, the harder it gets. And then I'll just simply take the clamps off and separate the two halves, and we'll see what came out. Hopefully it'll look somewhat like a Convair 990-880 nose section. All right, my friends, now for the moment of truth. Let's go ahead and, she's been sitting, the mold has been sitting for about, through the night. So I would say about 12 to 16 hours. And let's have a look. Let's see what we got. I'm just going to gently peel this away here. And make sure we loosen it around the back edge of the mold. There we go. We're lifting away. And the longer you wait, the easier the halves can separate away from the actual mold. Ooh, look at that. Oh yeah, look at that, man. Are you kidding me? Oh yeah. Wow. That came out nice. So I'm going to separate it away from the other half of the mold. Look at that, man. Oh boy. That looks good. Whoa, yeah. That's what I'm talking about. This is the closest you're going to get to baking in scratch building, I think. This is like making a cake or something, like having bread rise, or, you know. Oh, wow. Yeah. Look at that. Look at that. Yeah, very uniform. Very uniform. We have a little area right there where some of the little area right in there where the epoxy didn't completely fill. couple of small areas in the seam, but nothing. I mean, I can fill that in easily with more resin and then sand that down. Look at that. Wow. Look at that. That is... Look at that. Convair 990/880 nose section. Look at that. Man. That is... Woo. That came out way better than I ever expected. Look at that. Man, that's sweet. That came out nice, man. You kidding me? Look at that. Wow. That is a world away from regular fiberglass cloth. That is just night and day right there. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to gently take a razor and I'm just going to very gently cut away this excess resin that formed on the two halves. So I'm just going to very gently trim it away. Very gently trim that away. And trim it away on the bottom. Oh yeah. Look at that, man. Look at that. That's beautiful. And the resin is not a super glossy resin. It's a bit matte. So depending on the type of resin you use, you're going to get different finishes. Again, this is more of a matte. This epoxy, this Z-epoxy from Zap is a bit dull. It's a little bit dull in its appearance, but that, I mean, at the end of the day, that's okay. That's not a big deal. Yeah, look at that. Oh yeah, that is just gorgeous. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and cut. There's a line there. That's where the mold ended. The mold ended, our nose mold. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut. I'm going to take a scissor and I'm going to cut that back there. I'm going to cut that back section. Cut the. I'm going to go ahead and cut the excess off and just get a fairly, fairly durable scissor, and just start to come in and slowly cut away the excess, because that's, when we eventually have this finished and filled in with the different things that we want to put inside of it, nose gear and cockpit kit, depending on what we're doing here. It's good to, obviously we don't need this excess carbon fiber on here. And there we have it. I cut away the excess carbon fiber cloth, and here's our nose section. Not bad. I'm very impressed. A couple of very small little imperfections, but nothing that a little bit of blackened out spackle into those areas, and then sanding, you won't even notice it. That's really nice. I like that. I am impressed. Convair 880/990 nose section. Yes, indeed. There we go. So something like, there's the model. There's the, pretty close, huh? I'm impressed with that. Yeah. Well, there we have it. A little bit of 3-ounce carbon fiber cloth, and we have our own carbon fiber Convair 880/990 nose section. And I must admit, this is a lot stronger and tougher than average standard 3-ounce or 5-ounce fiberglass. So carbon fiber is definitely the way to go. It's very lightweight and it's very strong. And this is a mold that I made probably about 6-7 years ago, and it's perfect for carbon fiber. So it came out really great. I'm really impressed. So yeah, This is going to go on either the Swiss Air 990 or Delta 880 that I have in the works for future airliners. I have the current American 990 and the JAL 880, but the two after this will have carbon fiber, nose section, tail sections, engine nacelles, etc. So as always, keep building, keep flying. This Demon Driver, as always, my friends, honored to have you guys watching, and take care.